respect to personal banking services to ensure that the market is working well for New Zealanders. Obviously, the cost of living is top of mind for New Zealanders at the moment, and we do need to ensure that there is a competitive market among banks providing personal loans, mortgages, credit cards and other banking services so people have confidence that they are getting the best deal possible. There have been long-standing concerns about this issue and whether or not banks are delivering on the benefits of competition and whether the market is working well for New Zealanders. Banks have had consistently high profits over a number of years, and their returns on some measures have outperformed their peers in other countries. You'll all know that New Zealand's banking sector is dominated by a small number of big players. The four major banks make up around 85% of the mortgage and other lending market and hold 90% of the share of total bank deposits. Loans by smaller lenders are growing, but they do remain small in comparison. We believe now is the right time to do this study. There has not been an in-depth look into competition in the banking sector for some time, and we have lagged behind other countries who have done that work in recent years. I want to make clear that the market study will not look at bank culture and conduct. As some of you may recall, in 2018, the Financial Markets Authority and the Reserve Bank did do that work, and it did result in a number of changes that I believe have been beneficial for consumers. Turning my page over. Also, to be clear, calling the study does not reflect a view that banks are operating illegally or that any particular bank is doing anything specifically wrong. New Zealand's banking system is sound and it does contribute to our financial stability. Rather, what we want to do here is focus on identifying any systemic, sector-wide issues that may be impeding or discouraging competition, and therefore meaning that consumers are not getting a fair deal that they deserve. We believe that the Commerce Commission is best placed to do this work. It has the expertise and the powers to examine these issues with the seriousness that they deserve. We do need to ensure that there is a competitive market in the banking sector, and this study will help us get there. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Dr. Duncan Webb to make a few introductory remarks before we take questions.
Thank you. So the Commerce Commission market study will focus on examining barriers to entry, expanding in the market, and the introduction or lack of innovative products and services, and also consumers' ability to switch between banks. The Commission will examine banks' profitability and other financial measures to assess competition in the sector. And it is important that Kiwis can trust that they're getting a fair deal from their banks. These market studies are in-depth. The study will be completed by the end of August 2024, and it will determine any actions needed to make sure that competition is working for bank customers. The Commission is expected to release a preliminary issues paper in August this year, and this will set a clear signal for the direction for the study and may uncover some discrete issues which the government could take steps to resolve ahead of the final report. And in addition to this, we're getting on with our work on open banking and consumer data rights, and we're releasing a draft legislation this week in that respect. And so consumer data rights will enable swift and easy comparisons and switching between banks. And whilst consumers already share their data, we want that to be able to be done in a much more trustworthy and effective way. So that's the guts of it, and we're happy to take any questions.
Minister, this is the first time we've seen an interim discussion paper. Usually there is an interim document that's released about 6 months later. Why are you making this step now, and why is it happening in August this year?
Well, I think...
this paper, the study, was designed in consultation with the Commerce Commission. We discussed with the Chair of the Commerce Commission whether that would be a reasonable time frame to show the direction of travel, to show the issues that had been identified, and he was very comfortable with that.
I do think it's important that we get on with the job. This is an issue that has been long-standing. There are a range of concerns that New Zealanders have, and I think, as Dr. Webb suggests, a couple of months gives the Commission time to prepare such an issues paper. Clearly, we want to do the job properly, so that means it will go into next year. So gives people an interim marker post for the direction.
Some cynics would say, if I could just follow up, some cynics would say that this is a pre-election ploy for the government to look like it's cracking down on big banking.
I don't indulge cynics. Yes. Well, that's what the study is designed to find out. I know that a lot of New Zealanders look at, for example, the level of bank profits and they say, well, is that fair? We need to get to the bottom of that. The issues are not easy to be able to pick your way through. That's why the Commerce Commission are the right people to do the work. But we have to give New Zealanders that confidence. As I said in my introductory remarks, New Zealanders can have confidence in the stability of our financial system. That is a given. What we need to test is whether or not we have a sufficiently competitive market that it delivers that fair deal.
Do you think that it's fair that banks are making $7 billion?
And that is exactly the question that we need to ask. Now, when we compare ourselves to other countries around the world, I'm going to answer, Mikey. When we compare ourselves to other countries around the world, we can see that the level of profit on equity or return on equity is higher than the average across the world. Now, the banks will say to you that there are specific reasons for that. We need to pull that apart. In a time when New Zealanders are struggling with their cost of living, I think it is reasonable for people to say, are we getting a fair deal here when we see those level of profits? That's what we have to test.
And can I just add to that? In addition to profits, one of the reasons a market can be competitive is ease of switching, new products and innovation. That's how we drive prices down, along with a simple profits focus. So the Commerce Commission has the tools to look at this and find out if we do have the right degree of innovation, and ability to switch in the banking sector.
Why doesn't the government give Kiwi Bank more capital or allow it to attract capital from elsewhere so that it can be a true competitor?
Yeah, I mean, two different hats I'm wearing here today, but obviously, we, in terms of the role that we see Kiwi Bank playing, we do want it to continue to be the disruptor role that was its initial vision. There are a variety of ways in which the government could do that. As you know, the ownership arrangements have recently changed, and over time the government will look at what it can do to support Kiwi Bank to be the player in the market we want to be. I don't think that takes away in any sense from the system issues that we're trying to get to today. Amelia.
How would you describe banking profits? Ginormous, excess, concerning, reasonable?
What I'd say is they are large in comparison to other countries, and that opens up a line of inquiry that I think is important for us to get into. As I said before, the banks themselves will tell you that there are reasons for that. An inquiry like this will allow us to dig into it. What I would say is that if you're a person struggling with the increasing cost of living, struggling with the cost of food, and you turn around and you look and you see the profits that banks are making, you have legitimate questions. That's what this study is designed to answer.
There were other fields that we looked into, insurance, for example. Why specifically banks?
These decisions are made firstly on the basis of what people are feeling in their pockets every day, and certainly banks was something that was raised time and again. And when those discussions were had with the Commerce Commission, there was agreement that this was an area which could be looked at, and in terms of whether those profits are extreme, whether they're anti-competitive profits, they think it's the right place to look. And this is looking into retail banking, mortgages, savings accounts, credit cards that touch on everyone's lives.
Just to add to that too, Amelia, if you look at the other studies that we've done, fuel, supermarkets, building supplies, these are things that people deal with every single day. Banking is similar to that. It would be arguable, I agree, that insurance could be a sector we look at. We've only got time to do and resources to do these inquiries properly, one at a time like this. And so we'll take ideas about future ones as we go. But I think you'd agree, in terms of people's day-to-day lives, the subjects we've put into a market study are important.
Just going back to...
Sorry, I missed the beginning of that.
The sector says it is competitive with the number of banks that are in the field. What is going on your radar in sector strategy?
Well, I think it's, you just need to talk to anybody on the street and their experiences of dealing with banks. There is the concern about profitability, but equally, as Dr. Webb said, how easy is it to be able to move between banks, to see innovative products come into the market, to be able to take them up? I had someone just as recently as a few days ago talk to me about bank fees as well and trying to understand what they work, how they work. So all of those quite practical issues are ones that can be looked at here. But there is a person on the street test here. I'm sure you'll probably go out and do some of that, and you will find that I think most people would say, if that's the case, if banks argue that they are genuinely competitive, then this will be a study that will show that. Sorry, Thomas? No. No, the most important thing here is to make sure that consumers get a fair go and that we have a banking system that's competitive.
Just going back to...
just still fit into this, because if a bank's putting in barriers to someone switching a bank, that's still conduct.
Yeah, I think this, so obviously we did the inquiry and we actually have a piece of legislation that arose out of that work in 2018 that's gone through Parliament that does make sure around things like advice and the way in which products are structured is being dealt with. So that was the focus of the conduct and culture inquiry. But the ability to switch banks is obviously one issue that's still live and we are still dealing with both through open banking and also potentially through this study.
Do you accept that some of the government and Reserve Bank's policymaking in the past few years has perhaps impacted bank profits, particularly slashing of interest rates, business finance guarantee scheme not including non-banks, funding for lending program limited to certain banks? These things have all helped the big four banks. Do you accept some responsibility?
Look, obviously the decisions that were made during COVID were the ones that we've all discussed many times before on making sure that we kept the economy moving forward, that we kept liquidity within the banking system. Those decisions were made mainly by the Reserve Bank, but also allowed via things like the indemnity by us. What I would say is I don't believe that there's huge evidence of a windfall gain for banks. What there is evidence of is long-term profits that are higher than comparative countries. So I think that's my answer to that part of your question. I don't think the evidence bears out windfall gain. What the evidence does bear out is that these are very large profits. They are profits that, when you compare them on return on equity to other countries, are higher on average. This is an opportunity for us to dig into that and make sure that consumers who are struggling with the cost of living are getting a fair deal.
Just going back to the timeline of August, will the government have a response after that initial paper has been released, i.e. what its plan of direction is, any policy that it may be considering like it has done in other interim reports?
Well, if the interim report, if that preliminary issues paper shows something that is a glaring need for attention, of course we'd look at it. But at the same time, we can't preface what that report will show.
And just going back to it, does the Commerce Commission has said that they wanted this report in August this year, very out of character from what they've done with the other market studies. It was them that pushed for this, not the government.
Well, we consulted on it. They're very comfortable
Who
with
raised
delivering.
it? Was it you or the Commerce Commission?
Oh, look, to be honest, I don't recall, but they're very happy to give a paper about their direction of travel and very happy to signal where they'll be looking.
So just to confirm, you don't...
Sorry, Amelia?
Yeah, but essentially, though, to Duncan's point, that means that parties are able to campaign on what they would do in response to the...
So no, let's be clear, it's an issues paper, it's not the full report, it's simply indicating where the bank, when they do their initial work. But there's no great conspiracy to be looking at here. This is about making sure that people can see the direction of travel. I have no doubt that parties will campaign in the election on what they think should happen in the banking sector. They would be doing that regardless. This means that there's no delay caused by the election in getting that issues paper out. It means we can meet the August 2024 deadline. So this is about an issue that we all know has been around for a long time, that we want to get on with.
The government has dragged its heels on that for years. Previous government talked about open banking, and we still don't have open banking. So again, do you take some responsibility for that?
Oh, we've been working hard on it. I mean, Dr. Webb will tell you about what's about to happen.
Yeah, well, look, we'll be consulting on that this week, so you can expect to see draft legislation this week. I think it's probably one of the most significant gains we can make, not just for banking, but across a number of industries, so that people can compare and switch easily. So we're working as fast as we can on that.
It's slow though, isn't it? And banks don't want it. So, is the government so just, dragging its heels? As I said, this was talked about.
Well, to be fair, the banks have come out and said that they'll be ready next year for the Big Four, 26 for Kiwi Bank, and part of that is that we've been pushing and talking about open banking with the banks, certainly since the beginning of this year, in my case, which is what I expect to.
Why does this inquiry focus on the personal sector? Why does it exclude lending to the business sector?
Oh, well, look, what we see is that people every day raise the question of their own mortgage interest rates, their own Visa card interest rates and credit fees. And when we discussed this and raised this with the Commerce Commission, they were of the same mind, that this was the most fruitful area to look and where we can get the biggest gain for the most people over the long term.
I'd also add to that there is a balance to be struck here between the depth of inquiry we want and the length of time. So if we were to include every aspect aspect of banking, it would be a 5-year endeavour. I think this, as Dr. Webb indicates, is an area where we know New Zealanders every day are feeling the impact of whether or not there is a competitive sector, whether or not they're getting a fair deal. So we'll welcome the opportunity to potentially look at other aspects of banking if that's where we go. But in order to get something good and serious done in the 14-month time frame, personal banking services are the way to do that.
Just in terms of your own personal experience, would you say that the banking sector is competitive? Like the banking association says the market is competitive.
My view is that there are questions to be answered about that. I can't stand here today and say definitively that it is. What I can have is evidence that we have, as I said in my introductory remarks, large market share held by a number of banks. We see profitability that is higher on return on equity than other countries. So there are enough questions to answer that I am legitimately interested in the outcome of this. The definitive statement the banks make, that's up to them. In some senses, of course, they're going to say that. We've now got the opportunity to have a thorough study to make that conclusion.
Anything out of the Australian inquiry a few years back that might come up here and kind of move on?
Yeah, I think the really important aspect there is that culture and conduct bit, which we dealt with at the time. And so that was, my reflection on looking at the Australian Bank inquiry was that that's the area that caused the most concern. And at the time, as a minister, that's why we moved the way we did. In terms of the wider banking sector, there will always be issues that we pick up, but nothing particular that puts us off the study. Yeah, look, they're not decisions that we've taken.
But when do you think this, obviously competition is being here, so when do you think that we can expect something?
The reason the government continues and now has, within core government, 100% ownership of Kiwi Bank is because we believe it is important that we have a bank that can play a disrupting role. We will be having discussions with the bank about their capital needs as we go on, but we haven't finalised those. No.
What about the extraordinary amount of increasing amount that New Zealanders are losing to scams that banks and what action banks have been taking against this?
I'm not sure that it's part of this.
Not really part of this, but look, in terms of scams, I think it's really important to recognise that banks need to do what they can to prevent against scams, but it is a partnership with customers. And just in terms of the steps they need to take, not clicking on links that they don't know where they come from, not responding to unsolicited phone calls. There's some basic rules out there, and it's really important that consumers understand.
They're not competition, but they're not competition.
But they're not competition issues.
They are serious issues.
If banks were responsible for paying their customers who lost...
I see the point you're making. Look, profitability generally is part of the gazetting notice that Dr. Webb's put out. If the Commerce Commission concludes they want to go down that path, I'm sure we wouldn't exclude it. But those issues, the core of those is the way Dr. Webb's described them. That work's happening now. Strongly encourage banks to be working with their customers on how to avoid scams. But in terms of an inquiry about the competitiveness of personal banking services and whether or not New Zealanders are getting a fair deal, there's a lot to deal with before probably we got to that.
Are you going to put more money on the table for financial literacy education? That's what it largely comes down to.
There's already work in that regard.
Yeah, and the Retirement Commissioner, whose real job is financial literacy, does a huge amount of work in that space, does the sorted website and a whole lot of other work, and I'm in constant contact with her, and she's doing a great job.
And we did in the budget have additional funding for financial advisory services, some of which includes financial literacy.
Okay, and on Kiwi Bank, sorry, do we have a timeline for when Kiwi Bank is capital?
No.
Well, why not? Because do you really believe it's a disruptive bank?
Well, I believe that's the reason it was set up, and one of the reasons it's been maintained in Crown ownership is so that we can continue for it playing that role. I take the point. Sometimes it's played that role, sometimes it hasn't, but there is scope there. None of that takes away from the reason why we're standing in front of you today, which is because we believe that there is a system-wide set of issues that need to be looked at. When I've got something to say about investment in Kiwi Bank, I'll say it.
Do you think Kiwi Bank would be more competitive if it had more capital, which it might be able to attract from elsewhere?
I'm not going to make more comments on that today because I do wear a number of different hats here, and that has some market moving potential. Last couple.
Some examples of where it's being more competitive for consumers. Like if they're sitting at home watching this and they're wondering, okay, how can it potentially impact me?
I think Dr. Webb's already listed them off. Bank fees, what you pay on your credit card. what mortgage rates you're able to get. These are the things that matter every day to people's cost of living. And, you know, the issues that are here are real. I'd say the most common thing that gets raised with me when people talk about banks is, am I getting a fair deal? Are these profits justified? Now we've got the opportunity to have a thorough inquiry into them.
Do you expect that the inquiry will look into the terms of New Zealand's got quite the low terms, right?
Yeah, so that actually goes to the range of products being offered, and the fact that the longest mortgage you can get in New Zealand is generally a 5-year mortgage. There's a question to be asked about why is it that we don't have competition for 10 or 20-year mortgages. So that's a classic example of a market that looks a little stagnant, and we'd like to know why.
Can I just go back to the question about the timeline here? This is the first time that, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but it's the first time that the Commerce Commission has come out with this paper idea. It's unprecedented. They've done about 5 or 6 market studies. You can't tell me whose idea it was, either yours or the Commerce Commission's. You can't.
I have a number of roundtable discussions with the Commerce Commission where ideas are bandied about. We settled on this study with this timeline in a cooperative and collaborative manner, and I'm very happy with that.
And just to...
Sorry, would you like to get a bit of airtime on this before the election?
Well,
With this paper?
I don't think that's the point, Janae. The point is that we have a study that's underway. These issues will be discussed. The issues paper isn't going to come to a lot of definitive conclusions, I imagine. What it does do is provide the opportunity for everybody to understand where we're at. You could have a counterfactual. We could say, well, we're not going to do the issues paper before the election. We then have the post-election period. We perhaps wouldn't get the issues paper into early 2024. That would delay the whole inquiry. So you could also look at it that way. All right, last one.
Oh, yeah. To what extent will New Zealanders actually be able to say, like, who's, making the most profits, or who, which banks aren't perhaps doing what they should, or is it all going to be...
Well, that information's already available, of course. People can see the profits that banks are making. I imagine when the Commerce Commission gets into that, they will be pulling apart data relative to the rest of the world, as well as internally relevant, but you can already see that. Thanks, everyone.
Right, thank you.